What would you do if the people you were about to call family laughed at your mother's death? That question played on a loop in my head as I stood motionless in the hallway, my hand still gripping the champagne flute I'd carried from the dining room. The laughter still echoed from behind the closed doors, sharp, cruel, and far too loud to be a misunderstanding. Just moments ago, I was floating on what was supposed to be the happiest week of my life. The flowers were ordered, my dress had just been steamed, and in 7 days, I was supposed to walk down the aisle and become Emily Reynolds. That name was on printed napkins, the welcome signs, the invitations. It was everywhere. But none of that mattered anymore. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I had stepped away to get some air, to fix my makeup after Nathan's cousin spilled a bit of red wine on my blouse. I took a detour past the sitting room, where his parents and siblings were gathered, talking and laughing over brandy and cake. Then I heard her name. My God, can you believe she made it through high school? That poor woman couldn't hold a job to save her life. Beverly, Nathan's mother, said, chuckling. Oh, and that whole sob story about her dying young? Please. People like that always find a way to make themselves martyrs, added Charles, his father, in the same smug tone he always used when talking about self-made types. Then the kicker. You'd think dying young would at least leave some dignity behind, Nathan's brother chimed in. But nope. Just a deadbeat with a sob story. They were talking about my mother, Susan Carter. The woman who raised me alone, who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, who skipped chemo so we could afford my SAT tutor. The woman who made cinnamon rolls from scratch every Sunday, who laughed at her own jokes, who never once let me feel like we didn't have enough. She died when I was 23. I still remember holding her hand in that hospice room, whispering promises I intended to keep, one of them being that I'd marry someone who respected her. And now? Her name was a punchline. The glass slipped slightly in my hand. I backed away slowly, not wanting to be hurt, not trusting myself not to scream. My breath caught in my throat like a hiccup made of glass. I walked past the foyer, out the side door, and into the garden, the very garden where we were supposed to have our wedding photos taken. The night air was cool against my skin, and my tears felt hot in contrast. I sat on the low stone wall near the fountain and stared at the fairy lights strung in the trees. They looked magical, but everything else felt like a lie. What hurt the most wasn't the words, they were disgusting, yes, but it was the laughter. The shared cruelty. And Nathan. He was right there. He heard it, and he laughed too. Not the same cruel belly laugh his brother gave, but a tight, uncomfortable chuckle, like he didn't want to rock the boat. Like he didn't want to pick a side. But not picking a side when someone mocks the dead is picking a side. My side just wasn't the one he chose. I don't know how long I sat out there before Nathan came looking for me. There you are, he said, voice light, like I'd just wandered off to smell the roses. Everything okay? I turned to look at him, mascara streaked down my cheeks, hair clinging to my damp forehead. I stared for a moment, then asked one simple question. Did you know they felt that way about my mom? His smile faltered. Emily, come on. You're taking this way too seriously. They were just joking. They called her a deadbeat. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's how they are sometimes. You know my family. They make inappropriate jokes when they drink. I'm not asking how they are, I said, standing. I'm asking how you can be okay with it. Nathan stepped closer, trying to take my hand. Babe, don't let this ruin our night. Don't let it ruin what we've built. The wedding's in a week. And there it was. The unspoken rule. Don't make waves. Don't make drama. Keep smiling. My mother lived her life breaking those rules, and I loved her all the more for it. I need to go, I whispered. Emily, wait. Please don't do this. But I was already walking toward the driveway, my heels clicking with purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena, my best friend. How's it going with the in-laws? I stopped and stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. I think I just called off my wedding. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I sat on the cold stone steps of the Reynolds Grand Estate, clutching my phone in my hands. My mind was still racing, the words of Beverly and Charles echoing in my ears, drowning out the beauty of the garden around me. The night was crisp, and even the stars above seemed to dim in comparison to the weight of everything that had just happened. But I wasn't really thinking about Nathan. I wasn't thinking about the wedding or the upcoming days of rehearsals and family dinners. I wasn't even thinking about the people who had just cruelly mocked my mother's death. No, my thoughts were with her, my mom, Susan Carter. My mother had always been the rock of my world. I don't know if I ever told her enough how much she meant to me. Maybe I didn't even realize how deeply I depended on her until she was gone. But as I sat there, frozen in my disbelief, her face was all I could see. She had been everything to me. The sun in my sky, the calm in my storm. She was the one who raised me with her bare hands, working long hours at the local diner, making sure I never felt lacking. She had big dreams for me, and even though she worked her fingers to the bone, she never made me feel guilty for her sacrifices. Instead, she always found time to remind me of the joy in the world, teaching me to dance in the kitchen, to laugh at myself, and most importantly, to love fiercely. I remember those late-night conversations, just the two of us. I was always so nervous about the future, college, relationships, what kind of life I'd have. But Mom always had a way of making me feel like everything would turn out okay. "You have so much inside of you, she'd say, smoothing my hair out of my face. "There's nothing you can't do." I closed my eyes, letting the memories flood my mind. I could almost smell her perfume, lavender and vanilla, and hear her voice, warm and reassuring. I could feel the weight of her hug, the way she'd hold me like I was the most precious thing in the world. But now everything felt different. I had left her behind when I moved away to New York, seeking independence, trying to make my own way in a world that felt so much bigger than my hometown. I had thought I was ready to build a new life. I thought I could live without her advice and her endless love, but tonight, the truth had hit me like a freight train. I hadn't just lost my mother, I had lost the anchor that kept me grounded. And Nathan was supposed to be my new anchor, my new family. But if his family could so easily mock the woman who gave me everything, how could I trust him to stand by me? How could I marry him knowing he wouldn't protect the very thing I held most dear? I pulled my knees to my chest and wiped my eyes, fighting back tears. The night air stung against my skin, but it wasn't enough to cool the heat of the anger that bubbled up inside me. I didn't want to feel this way, but I had to. I had to be strong for myself, for my mother. The memories of her lessons, of the quiet confidence she had always shown me, surged within me. I had been taught to stand up for myself, to defend what was right. And tonight, I had to choose that path. But I also knew that this choice wasn't going to be easy. Nathan wasn't just my fiancé, he was my best friend, the person I thought I could build a future with. The future I had dreamed of for so long, the one where we'd be a team, facing life's challenges together. I stood up slowly, wiping my face with the back of my hand, and sent a quick text to Lena. "I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore. Can you come get me?" The message didn't need an explanation. Lena knew. She'd been my sounding board through every step of this whirlwind romance, and she knew the pressure I had been under to please Nathan and his family. She also knew what kind of person my mother had been. How she had shaped me, how she had always encouraged me to be my own woman, to never settle. Not long after, Lena's reply came through. "On my way. Just breathe. You're doing the right thing." I took a deep breath and walked away from the Reynolds mansion, my heels clicking against the stone pathway. The front door opened, and I glanced back to see Nathan's silhouette in the doorway. He called my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't owe him an explanation. I arrived at Lena's apartment an hour later, my head still spinning, but with a sense of clarity I hadn't had before. She didn't ask me any questions, just opened the door and pulled me into a hug, her arms strong around me. For the first time that night, I felt safe, like I could breathe again. "Did you want to talk about it?" Lena asked, leading me to the couch. I shook my head. "Not yet." "Okay, but when you're ready." "I'm here." I smiled faintly. Lena was the best friend I could have ever asked for. She had always been there for me, through thick and thin. And in this moment, her presence was a quiet comfort. I stared out the window, watching the city lights twinkle below, and thought about everything that had just happened. In the space of a few hours, I had gone from planning the most important day of my life to making a decision that would change my life forever. I thought about my mom again, about her voice, her smile, her resilience. How she had always told me to do what was right, even when it was hard. Tonight, I had done what she would have wanted. And somehow, that made everything feel a little less impossible. The days after leaving Nathan were a blur. It wasn't just the wedding that was canceled. It was the entire life I thought I was building with him. The future I had once seen so clearly was now a fog of confusion and hurt. I had spent so long trying to be the perfect bride, trying to fit into a family that seemed to have no respect for the most important person in my life. And now I was left with nothing but the pieces of a shattered dream. I didn't know what to do with myself. The night after I left Nathan's, I had stayed at Lena's apartment, curled up on the couch under a thick blanket, feeling numb. The city lights outside were distant and indifferent, a stark contrast to the chaotic whirlwind of emotions I was grappling with inside. Lena had tried to comfort me, but even her presence couldn't fill the emptiness I felt. I had lost my mother years ago, and now I was losing Nathan. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I could ever trust anyone again. Lena knew I needed space. She didn't ask me 1,000 questions, didn't try to convince me to feel differently. She simply gave me time, which was exactly what I needed. It wasn't until 2 days later that I finally answered my phone. I had ignored all of Nathan's calls, his texts, and his messages on social media. He was relentless in his pursuit of some kind of explanation, but I wasn't ready to face him yet. Not after what had happened. But then, I saw a message from him that stopped me in my tracks. "I don't know what happened, Emily. I know my family said some awful things, and I should have said something, but I was trying to keep the peace. But what they said wasn't right. You've always been my everything, and I don't want to lose you. Please, can we talk?" It was tempting. The words were sincere, at least on the surface. But I had heard those same words before. Promises that didn't hold weight when it really mattered. Still, a small part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that this was a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe Nathan wasn't the person his family was. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had known it the moment I heard his laughter in that sitting room. He had chosen them. Over me. Over my mother. I replied, typing quickly. "I don't think I can ever forgive you for what happened. You chose to stay silent, Nathan. You chose their laughter over standing by me. Over my mother's memory. I need space. Please stop calling me." I stared at the text for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. I knew this was the final nail in the coffin, but something about it felt freeing. As soon as I pressed send, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I put the phone down and leaned back on the couch, trying to process everything. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worrying about what Nathan thought or what his family expected. It was just me. Alone. And that was okay. But still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. I had always believed in love, in the idea of finding someone who would be my partner in every sense of the word. Someone who would see me for who I truly was, flaws and all, and love me anyway. For a while, I thought Nathan was that person. He had been my best friend, my confidant. We had shared everything, our dreams, our plans, our hopes for the future. But now I realized I had never really known him. At least, not in the way that truly mattered. And that hurt more than I cared to admit. But I knew something else too. I wasn't going to let myself be defined by Nathan's family or the life I had lost. I wasn't going to shrink into the background of my own story. I had to find myself again, and that meant accepting the reality of the situation. So, that afternoon, I made a decision. I was going to rebuild. Not for anyone else, but for me. I was going to heal. It wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to be quick, but it was the only way forward. The following week, I spent more time with Lena, letting myself rest and refocus. She was incredible, offering a listening ear when I needed it and giving me the space I craved when I needed to process things alone. We spent most of our time at her apartment or at the local coffee shop, where I started to piece together what had happened and why it had to happen. I spent hours reflecting on the good memories with Nathan, the late-night walks, the endless talks, the inside jokes that had once made me feel so special. I didn't want to forget those moments. They had been real, but I also knew I had to let them go. Holding on to them wouldn't change the truth. Nathan wasn't the person I had thought him to be, and that reality hurt more than I cared to admit. One afternoon, as I sat on Lena's couch, my phone buzzed with a new message. I expected it to be Nathan again, but instead, it was from my mother's old friend, Mrs. Simmons. I know it's been a while, Emily, but I wanted to reach out. I'm thinking of you and wanted to remind you how proud your mom would be of you. I hope you're doing okay, dear. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read her message. I could almost hear my mom's voice, warm and loving, telling me everything would be okay. I felt a deep sense of comfort, knowing that someone who had known her so well was still here for me. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. My mother's love was still with me, guiding me, and I realized that I wasn't truly alone. The days that followed were filled with moments of clarity, small victories in the midst of chaos. The heartbreak was still there, lingering in the background, but it was no longer the focal point of my life. I realized, for the first time in years, I could breathe freely again. I could make choices for myself, without fear of disappointing anyone, without worrying about meeting anyone else's expectations. It was a strange feeling, one that was equal parts terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in months, I found myself going for long walks again, just like I used to before everything became about wedding plans and keeping up with Nathan's family. I'd lace up my sneakers, throw on a hoodie, and hit the pavement without a destination in mind. The city was bustling as always, but for once, I felt part of it again. I wasn't just moving through the motions, I was living in the present, and that felt liberating. Lena had been my rock during this time, and though she never once pushed me to talk about Nathan or the wedding, I could tell she was worried. She would drop little comments here and there, reminding me to take care of myself, to not lose sight of who I was. I knew she was right. I had spent so much time trying to fit into someone else's life, trying to please Nathan, trying to make everything perfect for his family, that I had forgotten what it meant to be me. One afternoon, while we were sitting in our usual coffee shop, Lena turned to me with a serious expression. "Emily, I know you're still hurting, but I want you to promise me something." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" "Promise me you'll stop letting other people's expectations dictate your life. You deserve better than that. You're worthy of love that sees you, not some version of you that others want." Her words hit me harder than I expected. They felt like a challenge I needed to take. I nodded slowly, thinking back to everything I had been through, how long I had allowed Nathan's world to consume me, how I had tried to make everything fit into a mold that wasn't mine. "I promise," I said, my voice steady. It wasn't just a promise to her, it was a promise to myself. The following week, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in what felt like forever. I went through my mother's old things. Her favorite books, the pictures of her when she was young, the letters she had written to friends and family. I hadn't realized how much I had avoided her things after she passed. It was easier to pretend that part of my life didn't exist than to confront the emptiness it left behind. But now, something shifted. I could feel my mom's presence with me as I opened each box, read each letter, and looked at each photo. She was still there, in every word, in every smile, in every memory. And I realized that while I might never stop grieving her loss, I could carry her with me, not as a shadow of sorrow, but as a source of strength. As I sorted through the boxes, I found an old journal of hers, one I had never seen before. It was leather-bound, worn from years of use, and as I opened the first page, I was greeted with her handwriting. My heart thudded in my chest as I began to read. My love, never let anyone tell you who you should be. You are enough, just as you are. You don't need to fit anyone's idea of perfection, just your own. You'll know when you've found the right person, the one who sees the real you, the one who doesn't need to change you. Until then, love yourself first and always. Tears sprang to my eyes as I finished reading her words. She had known me, had always known me better than I had known myself. She had never pushed me to fit any mold. She had always encouraged me to stand tall and be proud of who I was, flaws and all. And now, more than ever, I understood what she had meant. I had been so focused on meeting Nathan's expectations, on pleasing his family, that I had forgotten my own worth. I had forgotten the lessons my mother had taught me, the most important one being that I didn't need anyone's approval to be worthy of love and happiness. I spent the next few weeks slowly rediscovering myself. I threw myself into work, picking up projects I had put on the back burner. I started taking pottery classes at the local art studio, a hobby I had always wanted to try but had never made time for. I took long walks through the park, sat at cafes with books, and began writing again, something I hadn't done in ages. Each day, I felt a little more like the person I used to be, the person I had almost lost in the process of becoming someone I thought I should be. Slowly but surely, I was reconnecting with the parts of me that had been buried under years of compromise. And then, one afternoon, Lena and I went to a small bookstore on the corner of 5th and Pine. I wasn't expecting to find anything special, but as I was browsing the shelves, something caught my eye, a book on self-discovery and personal growth, titled Becoming You. The title made me smile. I pulled the book from the shelf and flipped through it, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. This book, these words, seemed like the next step on my journey, one I needed to take for myself. As I left the bookstore, Lena by my side, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was as if, piece by piece, I was starting to put my life back together. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It had been a few months since I'd walked away from Nathan and his family. The days blurred together, and slowly but surely, the fog of heartbreak began to lift. I had made peace with my decision to cancel the wedding, and I was starting to understand that, in many ways, it was the best thing that could have happened. The relationship that had once seemed like my future was no longer a part of my present. And, for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future again. My life was my own, and I could shape it however I wanted. But there was still one thing missing. I wasn't looking for love, not actively. In fact, the thought of a relationship made me a little uneasy. The hurt I had felt from Nathan's betrayal still stung, and I wasn't ready to let anyone into my heart. But I also knew that, eventually, I would have to learn to trust again. That was the hard part. And I had to be patient with myself as I took that first step. It was a chilly Saturday afternoon when Lena called to invite me to a small get-together at her friend's place. It wasn't a party, just a casual gathering of people she knew from her yoga classes and a few other friends. At first, I hesitated. The thought of socializing with new people, especially after the emotional roller coaster I'd been through, felt overwhelming. But Lena was persistent. Come on, you've been so cooped up in your apartment, working nonstop and burying yourself in books. It's time to get out. You deserve some fun. Plus, it'll be a low-key thing. No pressure. I sighed but agreed. I had to start somewhere. I had to step outside my comfort zone, even if it was just for a few hours. The evening of the gathering arrived, and I found myself standing at Lena's door, holding a bottle of wine I had picked up on my way over. My nerves were on edge, but I told myself it was just a small get-together. It wasn't like I was about to meet a room full of strangers. I could handle this. I had to handle this. Lena greeted me with a warm hug, a welcoming smile, and a promise of fun. We walked to her car, and as we drove through the city, I tried to focus on the present, not the past. It was a little harder than I anticipated. When we arrived at the house, the party was in full swing. The lights were low and laughter filled the air. The smell of food and wine mixed with the soft hum of music. People milled about, sipping their drinks and chatting in small groups. I felt a little out of place, but Lena quickly found a few familiar faces and introduced me around. At first, I stayed close to Lena, easing myself into the crowd. The conversations were light: work, hobbies, the usual small talk. Everyone seemed nice enough, but I kept to myself, observing more than participating. My mind still drifted back to Nathan and his family, and the hurt I had tried so hard to push aside. And then, as if the universe had other plans for me, I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you Emily Carter?" I turned, startled, to face the source of the voice. The man who spoke had dark brown hair, a warm smile, and the kind of eyes that made you feel like he genuinely cared about what you had to say. He was taller than Nathan, but not by much, and there was something about his presence that felt calming. He wasn't imposing or arrogant, he simply exuded a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't demand attention, but still managed to capture it. I blinked, trying to place him. "Yes, that's me. Have we met before?" He smiled a little wider. "Not exactly. I'm Caleb. I'm a friend of Lena's from her art class. She mentioned you'd be here tonight." "Oh, okay," I said, relieved that I wasn't about to have some awkward interaction with a total stranger. "It's nice to meet you." Caleb nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "Lena's been talking about you a lot. She told me you've been through a lot lately." I stiffened, immediately wondering what Lena had said. The last thing I wanted was for people to feel sorry for me or treat me differently because of my past with Nathan. But Caleb's tone was gentle, not pitying. He seemed genuinely interested, not in a prying way, but as if he actually wanted to know me. "I've had my ups and downs," I said with a small, tight smile. "But I'm getting there." Slowly, he gave me an understanding nod. "I can imagine. But I'm glad to see you out tonight. It's important to take time for yourself, to remember that life goes on, even after everything falls apart." There was something so honest about him, so grounded. I found myself drawn to him in a way I hadn't expected. But I quickly reminded myself that this wasn't a time for new relationships. I wasn't looking for someone to fill the void left by Nathan. I just needed to focus on healing. Still, as we talked more, I felt a sense of ease I hadn't felt in a long time. Caleb wasn't trying to impress me or make me laugh with clever jokes. He just spoke with kindness, and for the first time that evening, I felt my shoulders relax, my defenses drop. We spent the next half-hour chatting, exchanging stories about art, life in the city, and our mutual love for quiet bookstores. He didn't ask about Nathan, didn't press me for personal details. It felt refreshing, like I was a person again, not just someone who had been through a painful breakup. As the night wore on, I found myself enjoying the evening more than I thought I would. I had let go of some of my anxiety, and even though I wasn't ready to dive into another relationship, I appreciated Caleb's company. He wasn't the type of guy who would rush things, and that was exactly what I needed. When the evening ended, Caleb offered to walk me to my car. I accepted, though part of me knew I didn't need to be escorted. Still, there was something comforting about his presence. As we reached the parking lot, he turned to me with a friendly smile. "It was really nice talking to you, Emily. I hope we run into each other again." I smiled back, surprised by how much I'd enjoyed our conversation. I'd like that. As I drove home, my mind raced. Caleb hadn't been what I expected. He wasn't a knight in shining armor, ready to sweep me off my feet. But he was kind, genuine, and real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see the possibility of something more. But not yet. For now, I was focused on myself, on healing, on rediscovery. Maybe love would come again one day. But for now, it was just nice to know there were people out there who saw me for who I really was, without expectations. And that was enough for now. It had been a week since I'd met Caleb at Lena's get-together, and I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation we'd had. I knew it was foolish to dwell on something so insignificant, but there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this than I initially thought. Not that I was ready to jump back into anything serious, of course. But it was nice to know that someone could see me for who I was, not just as the girl who had been engaged to Nathan, not just the one who had been hurt, but as me. As Emily, the woman who was learning to rebuild her life from the wreckage of a past she didn't want to revisit. I hadn't heard from Caleb since that night. I wasn't surprised. I hadn't expected him to call or text immediately. But a part of me, the hopeful part, had wondered if he would. I didn't know if I was ready to face what that might mean, but something about him had made me feel, well, alive again. Lena had noticed my quiet mood. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked one afternoon when we were having lunch together. "Who?" I played it off, but I knew she could see through me. She rolled her eyes. "Caleb, obviously. You were in a much better mood after that night. I saw how you two clicked." I hesitated before answering. "Maybe. I don't know. He's nice, but I'm not sure I'm ready for anything like that. I'm still figuring things out, you know? There's still a lot I need to do for myself before I can even think about a relationship." Lena took a sip of her coffee, considering my words. "I get it. You're still healing. But that doesn't mean you should shut down the possibility of something good happening. You don't have to rush into anything serious, but you should give yourself the chance to enjoy someone's company. You deserve that." Her words made me stop and think. I wasn't ready to put myself back out there completely, but Lena was right. I had spent so much time trying to heal and rebuild that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply enjoy someone's presence without the weight of expectations, without the need to make it something bigger than it was. "Maybe you're right," I said, setting down my sandwich. "Maybe I should reach out to him. See where things go." "Exactly. Just take it slow," Lena encouraged. "You deserve to enjoy life again, Emily." That evening, after I returned home from our lunch, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lena had said. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone, unsure of what to do. I had the number Caleb had given me the night of the party, but I had kept it saved, unsure whether I would ever actually use it. It felt like stepping into unknown territory, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. But I had to take the step. For myself. Not for Nathan. Not for anyone else, just for me. I typed a quick message to Caleb, a simple, "Hey, it's Emily. I had a great time talking the other night. Hope you're doing well," and hit send. Almost instantly, I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest. What if he didn't respond? What if he had forgotten about me already? What if he wasn't interested? But just as I was about to overthink it, my phone buzzed. "Hey, Emily. I'm glad to hear from you. I've been meaning to reach out, but I didn't want to overwhelm you. I had a really good time talking to you too. Would you want to grab coffee sometime soon? No pressure, just a casual hangout." I stared at the message for a few seconds, a small smile tugging at my lips. It felt so easy. There was no drama, no pressure. Just a simple invitation to get to know each other more. I quickly replied, "Coffee sounds great. How about Saturday morning?" We exchanged a few more messages, finalizing the details, and by the end of the conversation, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling inside me. This wasn't about rushing into something. This was about taking it slow, enjoying each moment for what it was. A simple coffee date, nothing more. Saturday morning arrived, and I found myself standing in front of the same little coffee shop where I'd met Lena countless times. I felt a little nervous, but not in the way I had felt on my first date with Nathan. This was different. This wasn't a let's see if we're compatible kind of date. This was two people, both still figuring things out, coming together to share a moment in time. When I stepped inside, Caleb was already there, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as I walked in, his eyes lighting up with recognition. A warmth spread through me as I smiled and walked over to his table. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from him. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," he replied, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "I'm glad you decided to come. I wasn't sure if you'd actually message me." I laughed softly. I almost didn't. But I figured, what's the harm in grabbing a coffee and seeing where the conversation goes? He grinned. "Exactly. No pressure. Just two people sharing a cup of coffee." We chatted for hours, easily falling into a rhythm. Caleb wasn't rushing me, nor was he pushing for anything more than simple conversation. He didn't ask probing questions about my past with Nathan. Instead, he asked about me, my likes, my interests, my childhood, my dreams. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be open without fear of judgment. It wasn't the start of a whirlwind romance, but it didn't need to be. It was the start of something genuine, something rooted in kindness, respect, and a shared understanding that both of us were still healing. As we stood to leave, Caleb turned to me with a sincere smile. "I'm really glad we did this, Emily. I know you're not looking for anything serious right now, and I respect that. But I'd love to get to know you more. No rush." I smiled back, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in months. "I'd like that too." As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. Not just in my journey of healing, but in learning to open myself to new possibilities. I wasn't in any rush. And, for the first time, I felt at peace with where I was. It was a second chance, not just with Caleb, but with myself. A chance to move forward, one step at a time. The weeks that followed that coffee date felt like a new chapter in my life, one that I hadn't expected but had come to appreciate. Caleb and I continued to meet for coffee, occasional dinners, and even a couple of weekend hikes. It wasn't anything too serious, but it was something I hadn't had in a long time, a connection that didn't feel forced, didn't carry the weight of expectations. It was just easy. And in those easy moments, I began to let go of the walls I had built around myself after the mess with Nathan. It wasn't that I was rushing to dive into a relationship with Caleb, but I was learning to trust again. I was allowing myself to experience small moments of joy with someone else. But there was still a part of me that held back. A part of me that feared trusting anyone fully, especially after everything I'd been through. It was like my heart had put up a security system, and it wasn't sure who had the passcode. One evening, a month after our first coffee date, Caleb suggested we go to a local art exhibit he had been wanting to check out. I was hesitant at first. My past with Nathan had made me wary of committing to plans, even casual ones, but I agreed. I wanted to take chances. I wanted to step out of my comfort zone. The exhibit was held in a small gallery downtown, and as we walked through the rooms filled with paintings and sculptures, I found myself engaged in conversation with Caleb in a way I hadn't expected. We shared our thoughts on the art, discussing colors, emotions, and stories behind each piece. It was lighthearted, but there was something about the way Caleb listened to me that made me feel heard, understood. As we walked into a dimly lit room, Caleb stopped in front of a large abstract painting. "What do you think of this one?" he asked, his voice soft. I stepped closer to the canvas. It was a swirl of dark blues and purples, the brushstrokes chaotic and wild, yet somehow unified. It's intense, but in a way that feels controlled. Like someone's letting go but still holding on to something. Does that make sense? He smiled, nodding. That makes perfect sense. I thought it was about struggle, but also hope. Like you can't have one without the other. I looked at him, feeling a surge of warmth. Yeah, that's exactly it. We stood there for a while, just taking in the peace. I could feel a connection growing between us in that moment, not just from the conversation but from the way Caleb was with me. It was easy, natural. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could let my guard down a little more. That was until we moved on to the next room. We had just entered the next section of the gallery when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from Lena or one of my friends, but it was a number I didn't recognize. "Is everything okay?" Caleb asked, noticing my hesitation. I nodded and quickly glanced at the message. The name at the top sent a chill down my spine. It was from Nathan. "Emily, we need to talk. I know things ended badly between us, but I can't keep running from what happened. Please, let's meet. I'm sorry for everything. I need to explain." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. After everything we had been through, after everything his family had done to me, this message felt like a gut punch. It was unexpected, and it stirred up all the old feelings of betrayal and heartbreak I had buried so deep. How could he just come back into my life like nothing had happened? How could he think that an apology would fix things? "Who is it?" Caleb asked, his voice low. He must have seen the change in my face. I looked up at him, trying to mask the anxiety swirling inside me. "It's Nathan. He wants to meet." Caleb's expression shifted. I could see the concern in his eyes. He didn't say anything at first, but I knew he was processing the situation. "What do you want to do?" I swallowed hard. I don't know. Part of me wants to tell him to leave me alone, but another part of me, I don't know. It's like a part of me still wants closure. But what's the point? It's been months. He made his choice. Caleb stepped closer, his presence reassuring. "You don't owe him anything. But if you feel like you need that closure for yourself, then you have to do what feels right. But you also don't have to go through this alone. I'm here if you need me." His words were like a lifeline, and for the first time since I'd received Nathan's message, I felt grounded. Caleb wasn't pressuring me. He wasn't telling me what I should do. He was giving me space to make my own decision, but with the comfort of knowing I didn't have to navigate this storm by myself. "I don't want to go back to all that pain," I said quietly, my voice trembling slightly. "But I think I need to hear him out. I think I need to see if there's any part of me that can finally move on." Caleb nodded. "That makes sense. And if you need me, I'll be right here." I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I didn't know what would come of this meeting with Nathan. Maybe it would bring the closure I needed. Maybe it wouldn't. But whatever happened, Caleb's support gave me the strength I hadn't realized I still had. I texted Nathan back, agreeing to meet him the following day at a local coffee shop. The conversation we needed to have was long overdue, but I wasn't prepared for how much it would test me. I wasn't sure if I could trust him again, but I knew that this meeting wasn't about reconciliation. It was about finally letting go. The next morning, I found myself sitting in the coffee shop, waiting for Nathan to arrive. My hands trembled slightly as I took a sip of my coffee, my thoughts racing. I didn't know what I expected from this meeting, but I did know one thing. Whatever happened, I would leave it behind me. Nathan's chapter in my life was over. Now, I just had to make sure that I could close it once and for all. I sat at the corner table of the coffee shop, watching the door with an almost obsessive intensity. I had agreed to meet Nathan, but a part of me couldn't quite believe that we were here, about to have this conversation after everything that had happened. I could still feel the weight of my decision to text him back, the swirling emotions that had followed me all night. What was I really hoping to gain from this meeting? Was I seeking closure, or was it something deeper, a need to understand, to confront him about the hurt he had caused me? The door opened, and I saw Nathan standing there, his posture stiff, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. I hadn't seen him in months, but it felt like no time had passed at all. He was the same, tall, dark-haired, with that familiar look of discomfort in his eyes that I'd grown accustomed to during our relationship. His mouth parted as if to speak, but no words came out immediately. I felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and relief in that moment. I didn't know what to say, but I could feel the unresolved tension between us. "Hey," Nathan finally said, his voice hesitant. "Hi," I replied, forcing a tight smile as I gestured to the empty chair across from me. I wanted to seem calm, but inside, my heart was pounding. He sat down, his eyes avoiding mine for a moment. I couldn't help but notice how different he seemed. The easy confidence he used to carry was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that made me question whether this apology was genuine or just another attempt to placate me. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said after a long pause, finally meeting my eyes. "I know I messed up. I hurt you, and I can't take that back. But I need you to know that I've been thinking about everything, about us, for a long time now. I didn't handle things well, and I regret that." I stared at him, waiting for him to continue. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. His apology, which felt like it had been a long time coming, was finally here. But was it enough? Could it be enough? Could I let go of everything that had happened and allow myself to feel some semblance of peace? "You're right," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You did hurt me, Nathan. You don't get to just erase that. You don't get to just walk back into my life and expect things to be okay." I watched as his face softened, regret deepening in his eyes. "I know I can't take it back. I know that. But I've learned. I've learned a lot. About myself, about you, about what I took for granted. And I want to make things right. I know I can't fix everything, but I want to at least try." His words hung in the air between us, and I realized I wasn't as angry as I thought I would be. Instead, I felt tired. Tired of reliving the past, tired of waiting for answers that never came, tired of wondering if I could ever forgive him for everything. I wanted to move on. I wanted to let go of all of it, but there was still a piece of me that needed to know why. Why did he do what he did? Why did he let everything fall apart the way it had? I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't understand, Nathan. You were the one who pushed me away. You were the one who kept saying things weren't right, but when I tried to understand what was going on, you shut me out. You didn't even give me a chance to fix it. You just ended things. So why now? Why do you want to talk?" Nathan looked down at his hands, fidgeting slightly with the cup in front of him. I could see how hard it was for him to meet my gaze. "I was scared, Emily. I was scared of losing myself. And I didn't know how to handle everything with my family, everything with us. It all piled up and I didn't know how to fix it. So I did what I always do, I ran." I felt a surge of bitterness rise in my chest. "So you ran away from me? From us?" He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to be the man you needed. And I thought I was doing the right thing by letting you go. But now I see how wrong I was. I should have talked to you. I should have let you in. I didn't." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw all of my hurt and anger at him and demand that he understand the pain he had caused. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was too tired. Instead, I just sat there, staring at him, trying to process the words that were coming out of his mouth. "Why now, Nathan?" I repeated, my voice quieter this time. "Why come back into my life when you've already left so much behind? Why should I trust you now?" Nathan met my gaze then, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in his eyes. It was raw, real, and it made me hesitate. "I don't expect you to trust me right away. I don't even know if I deserve your forgiveness. But I'm here because I can't keep running anymore. I want to make things right, even if that means just being honest with you." His words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. And I didn't know if I ever would. But there was something about the sincerity in his voice, the pain in his eyes, that made me wonder if there was a chance for closure for both of us. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Nathan," I said, my voice trembling just slightly. "But I appreciate you being honest with me. I really do. And I think that's all I needed to hear." There was a long pause as we both processed the moment. For a brief second, The anger I had carried for so long seemed to slip away, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I didn't need to forgive him right now. I didn't need to have all the answers. But this conversation, this moment, felt like the final chapter in the book of Nathan and me. It was over and I was finally ready to close it. I think I'm done, Nathan, I whispered, almost to myself. I think I'm ready to move on. Nathan nodded slowly, his expression a mix of sorrow and understanding. I know. I didn't expect anything else. I just needed you to know how sorry I am. With those final words, the tension in the room began to lift. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no sudden shift in emotions. But there was a sense of finality, a quiet peace settling in my chest. We both stood up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel burdened by the weight of the past. Nathan and I shared one last, silent look before he turned to leave. And as I watched him walk away, I realized something important. I had done it. I had let go. I didn't need him to heal, to move forward. I was strong enough to do that on my own. I walked out of the coffee shop, my heart a little lighter, my mind a little clearer. The weight of Nathan's betrayal no longer clung to me. It was a chapter closed, one that no longer had a hold on me. As I stepped into the sunlight, my phone buzzed again, this time, a message from Caleb. Hey, I was thinking of you. How did everything go with Nathan? I smiled to myself, typing back a simple reply. I think I'm finally ready to move on. It had been a week since my conversation with Nathan, and while the emotional aftermath was still lingering, there was a new lightness in my step. The weight of unresolved anger and hurt had begun to fade. I didn't feel the overwhelming urge to look over my shoulder or second-guess every decision I made. That chapter was officially closed. Nathan had come back, said his piece, and left me with what I needed: closure. It wasn't perfect. I wasn't magically healed from everything that had happened, but I was starting to understand that healing wasn't something that happened all at once. It was a process, a series of small steps forward, and I had finally taken one of those steps. Caleb and I had been texting more regularly since I told him about the meeting with Nathan. His words had always been a source of comfort, and his calm, steady presence had helped me find the peace I was seeking. I hadn't told him everything. Part of me still felt like I needed to process it alone. But I could tell he understood. The next Saturday afternoon, Caleb invited me to a local farmer's market. I hesitated at first, thinking I wasn't quite ready for something that might feel too normal. But then I realized that normal was exactly what I needed. I needed to experience joy again. I needed to remember that life wasn't always about pain and loss. It was about moments of simplicity and connection. We met at the entrance, and when I saw Caleb, I couldn't help but smile. He had that familiar spark in his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, I felt excited to spend time with him. He was wearing a casual jacket and jeans, and he grinned as he waved. "Hey, you made it," he said, his voice warm. I waved back, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't expected. "Yeah, thought I'd give it a shot. It's been a while since I've done something like this." He raised an eyebrow. "Something tells me you're not a regular at farmers markets." I laughed, a genuine laugh that felt so foreign to me after everything that had happened. "You're right. But it's a good excuse to get out and enjoy the weather." We walked through the rows of stalls, the air filled with the scent of fresh produce, flowers, and homemade baked goods. Caleb pointed out various fruits and vegetables, talking animatedly about his favorite things to cook with. It was simple, but it was a breath of fresh air, a reminder of the joys I'd been missing. We stopped at a stall selling handmade candles, and Caleb picked up a lavender-scented one, holding it up to my nose. "You have to smell this. It's like calm in a jar." I inhaled the sweet, calming fragrance. "It smells amazing," I said, laughing. "Maybe I need one of these to calm my mind." He grinned. "I think we could all use a little more calm, especially after the week you've had." I nodded, feeling grateful for how attuned Caleb was to my needs. even when I wasn't sure what they were myself. I appreciate you being patient with me. I didn't know what I needed, but you've been really understanding. Caleb looked down at me, his expression softening. You don't need to thank me for that. I just want to be here for you, Emily. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. His words struck me deeper than I expected. I wasn't used to hearing things like that. I wasn't used to someone being so steady, so consistent. Caleb wasn't asking for anything from me, except for me to be myself. After everything I'd been through, it was a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been craving. You know, I said, as we walked to the next stall, it's strange. I think, for the longest time, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was waiting for everything to fall apart again. But with you, I don't feel that. I feel like I can just breathe. Caleb smiled, a small, quiet smile that seemed to reach all the way to his eyes. That's the best feeling, isn't it? Not having to hold your breath, wondering when everything's going to fall apart. I nodded, feeling my heart soften. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to let someone in again. Not all the way, not right away, but enough to see where it could go. I didn't have to rush. I didn't have to have all the answers now. We continued exploring the market, stopping to sample various cheeses, homemade jams, and pastries. We laughed at the goofy little trinkets at one booth and admired the artwork at another. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was just enjoying life again. It wasn't about making up for lost time or fixing broken pieces. It was about being present. In that moment, I was just Emily. Not the girl whose life had been turned upside down by betrayal. Not the girl who had spent months healing from a broken heart. Just me. And that was enough. Later, we sat on a bench, enjoying a fresh juice I'd bought from one of the stalls. Caleb took a sip and glanced over at me, his eyes searching. So, tell me, what's next for you? Now that Nathan is in the past, now that you've taken that step, what's your next move? I thought about it for a moment, my heart light but still cautious. I think I'm ready for new things. New experiences. Maybe new beginnings. Caleb smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Sounds like a great place to be. As I sat there with Caleb, the sun dipping lower in the sky, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to see where it might take me. And as Caleb reached over to give my hand a gentle squeeze, I felt the stirrings of something new, something real. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something fresh from where I was now. I didn't need all the answers. I just needed the courage to move forward, step by step. The days seemed to glide by in a way I hadn't felt in months. I had gone from being so consumed by the past to finally feeling a sense of peace. There was a lightness in my heart, a sense of possibility that had been absent for a long time. It wasn't that I was over everything or that I had forgotten, but I had learned to exist outside of the chaos. Caleb and I spent more time together, our connection growing deeper with each passing day. We went on hikes, explored new cafes, and even tackled a weekend road trip to a small town on the coast. It felt effortless. It felt like exactly what I needed. I had been cautious at first, hesitant to put too much of myself into anything new, but the way Caleb treated me patiently, without rushing, without pushing for more than I was ready to give, made me feel safe. And that safety was a gift. But then, as with all things that felt too good to be true, life threw a curveball my way. It was late one Thursday evening, and I had just finished a late dinner when my phone buzzed. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was used to the occasional text from Caleb or one of my friends, but this time, the name that appeared on my screen sent a jolt through my body. It was Nathan. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I froze. After our conversation at the coffee shop, I had assumed we were done, finished. I hadn't heard from him since, and I hadn't been looking for any contact. Yet here he was, reaching out, and I couldn't help but wonder why. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation. The message was short, a simple text that read, "Can we talk?" Just like that, everything I had worked so hard to move past came rushing back. My heart raced as a storm of emotions stirred inside me. Anger, confusion, frustration, and, underneath it all, a deep-rooted sense of betrayal. He had no right to ask for anything from me. No right to try to re-enter my life after everything. And yet, there was a part of me, a small, buried part, that wanted to know why. Why now? What was his angle? Why couldn't he just leave things in the past where they belonged? I stood up from my chair, pacing the small space of my living room. The old habit of overthinking kicked in. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I was just being petty. But then I remembered the hurt, the weeks of confusion and heartbreak that had followed his departure. And suddenly, the anger wasn't so easily dismissed. I typed out a quick reply. "Why? What do you want?" The response came almost immediately. "I know it's been a while. I've thought a lot about everything. And I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear, but I need to explain myself. Please, just give me a chance to talk." I stared at the screen. I was torn, stuck between my desire to know what he had to say and the self-preserving instinct to slam the door shut and move on for good. But curiosity got the better of me. Maybe I was still holding on to something, an unresolved need for closure. Maybe I just needed to hear it from him. I was tired of wondering. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Fine. We can meet. But I'm not doing this for you, Nathan. I'm doing it for me." The seconds stretched into minutes before his reply came through. "Thank you. I promise I'll be honest." I sat back on the couch, my thoughts racing. I had no idea what he was going to say, but something told me that this conversation would change everything again. The following afternoon, I found myself standing outside a small cafe, waiting for Nathan. My palms were sweaty, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air was cool, a slight breeze rustling the leaves of the trees above me, but it didn't bring any relief. My mind was still caught in a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and memories. I hadn't seen Nathan in person since the coffee shop, and now, here we were, about to revisit everything. When he arrived, my first instinct was to walk away. But I didn't. I stood my ground, facing him with the same resolve I had felt when I decided to let go of our past. He looked different, his hair a little longer, his face a bit more tired. But his eyes were still the same, guarded, hesitant, as though he wasn't sure if he had the right to be here. "Hey," he said softly, his voice carrying an uncertainty I hadn't heard before. "Hi," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. Nathan sat down across from me, and for a moment, there was silence. The awkwardness between us was palpable, but it was more than that. There was a heavy, unspoken weight in the air, as if neither of us was sure where to begin. Finally, Nathan broke the silence, his voice low and sincere. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Emily. I know what I did, and I know how much I hurt you. But there's something I need to tell you, something that's been eating at me." I waited, my arms crossed over my chest, the tension in my muscles a physical manifestation of how on edge I felt. "I was selfish," Nathan continued, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "I pushed you away because I didn't know how to handle the things that were happening with my family. There's more to it than what I told you before, and I think you deserve to know everything." I leaned in slightly, my interest piqued, but my guard still up. "What do you mean?" Nathan exhaled, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his coffee cup. When she made those comments about your mother at the wedding, it wasn't just about what she said. It was about everything else. She didn't approve of us, Emily. She thought I was making a mistake with you, and I let her talk me into ending things." I blinked, taken aback by his admission. "So, you listened to your mother? You let her dictate our relationship?" Nathan nodded, his voice cracking slightly. "I was afraid, Emily. Afraid of disappointing her, afraid of losing her approval. And in doing that, I lost everything. I hurt you." I sat there, stunned by the revelation. My stomach twisted as the truth settled in. It wasn't just Nathan's fear that had ruined everything. It was his inability to stand up for me, to protect what we had. And for that, I would never forgive him. But in this moment, I realized something important. Nathan wasn't the person I had thought him to be. He wasn't the villain I had imagined in my head. He was just a man who had made a series of terrible choices, driven by fear. But that didn't change the fact that those choices had ruined us. Is that it? I asked quietly, my heart heavy with a mix of sadness and relief. Is that all you needed to say? Nathan met my eyes, his own filled with regret. No. I just needed you to understand why. I needed you to know that it wasn't about you. It was about my own weaknesses. I nodded slowly, processing his words. And for the first time, I realized that even though I had been hurt, even though I had spent months angry and betrayed, I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Nathan. Not at his family. Just at this situation. Thanks for telling me, I said, finally standing up. But I think I need to move forward now. For real this time. Nathan didn't stop me as I turned to leave. And as I walked away, I felt something shift inside me. The past was officially behind me, and I was ready to keep moving forward. It had been a few weeks since that conversation with Nathan. The dust had finally settled, and the remnants of the past no longer loomed over me. It felt like I was finally free, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. But even more than that, I felt a new sense of strength, a quiet confidence that had emerged from within me as I embraced the lessons I had learned. I had spent so much time being afraid of what the future might hold. Afraid of repeating my mistakes, afraid of getting hurt again. But now, I understood that the future was unwritten. It was mine to shape, not dictated by the mistakes of others or the decisions they had made for me. Caleb and I had continued to grow closer, and while I hadn't rushed into anything, I could feel the connection between us deepening in ways I hadn't expected. We still took our time, savoring the moments we shared. But there was something undeniably special about our bond. It was different from anything I had ever experienced before. One Sunday afternoon, Caleb suggested we take a walk in the park near his apartment. The sun was bright, the sky clear, and the air crisp with the promise of spring. We walked side by side, casually talking about everything and nothing. As we strolled through the park, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. A few months ago, I never would have imagined that I would be here, with someone I trusted, feeling at peace with myself and my past. But now, as I looked at Caleb, I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. We stopped by a bench, overlooking a small pond. The sight of the water, gently rippling in the breeze, brought a sense of calm I hadn't realized I was missing. Caleb sat down first, patting the spot beside him. I sat next to him, and for a moment, we just watched the water, the quiet surrounding us a stark contrast to the storm of emotions I had faced not too long ago. Caleb turned to me, his expression serious. "You've been through so much, Emily. And yet, here you are, standing tall. I'm proud of you." I looked at him, surprised by the weight of his words. Caleb wasn't the type to offer praise lightly, but there was something in his eyes that made me believe he truly meant it. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft but full of sincerity. "I never would have made it through without you. You've been more than patient, more than understanding. You've helped me find my way back to myself." Caleb smiled, his hand brushing mine as he reached for it. "You're the one who did the hard work, Emily. You faced your demons, you let go of the past, and you started living again. I'm just here to walk beside you." I squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth spread through me. His words, though simple, meant the world. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just healing from the past. I was building something new. And Caleb wasn't a part of my healing, he was a part of my future. The conversation turned lighter after that, as we talked about our hopes, our dreams, and what the future might hold. We laughed about our favorite shows and shared thoughts on random topics, but underneath it all, there was a deep sense of connection. The past was behind us, and we were standing on the precipice of something new, something real. Later, as the sun began to set, Caleb stood up and pulled me to my feet. He led me to a nearby bench under a tree, where we sat in silence for a while, watching the sky shift from blue to pink to gold. And then, out of nowhere, Caleb turned to me with a look of quiet resolve. "Emily," he began, his voice calm but filled with meaning, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I want to see it with you. I want to be a part of it. And I want to keep walking beside you, no matter where life takes us." My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at him, my mind racing with 1,000 emotions. I hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated such a big moment to come so soon. But as I looked at him, I realized that I had found something I didn't even know I was looking for: stability, comfort, and, above all, trust. "I want that too," I said, my voice steady, my heart full. Caleb smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made everything feel right. "Then we'll take it one step at a time. Together." The world around us seemed to fade away as we sat there, side by side, letting the words settle between us. It was a promise. Not one of grand gestures or declarations, but a promise of presence, of mutual respect, and of sharing our lives in a way that felt easy and true. We didn't need to rush. There was no deadline, no pressure. We just needed to keep moving forward, day by day, knowing that we were there for each other. In that moment, I realized that the story I had been writing was not just about healing from the past or finding closure. It was about new beginnings, fresh starts, and the endless possibilities that awaited me. I had come full circle. And as I looked at Caleb, my heart full of hope for the future, I knew that no matter what came next, I would be okay. Because I had found something real. I had found love, not the kind that was dependent on perfection, but the kind that was rooted in honesty, patience, and the willingness to keep showing up for each other. With Caleb by my side, I was ready to face whatever the future had in store. Together. And that brings the story to a close. I hope you enjoyed the journey. Let me know if you'd like to work on anything else or expand further. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?